Welcome to the Liberating Joy in Learning podcast. I'm Brené Brown, and we're continuing our discussion of how other books or theories about learning and growth help us understand learning liberated principles. Today we're discussing Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection.
All right, in the process of studying shame and fear, Brown began looking at people she describes as wholehearted. She learned that knowledge is important, but only if we're being kind and gentle with ourselves as we work to discover who we are. Wholeheartedness is as much about embracing our tenderness and vulnerability as it is about developing knowledge and claiming power. Later on, she explains that only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. And she's talking about our darkness. Only when we are brave enough to explore our darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. This concept of a wholeheartedness takes me back to the name of our very first podcast episode, Give Learning a Heart. Discovering who we are and learning and growing do involve gaining knowledge. They do require our minds, but we also need to bring our hearts and our intuition into the equation, as Brown suggests. We need to build on fragile strengths. Brown also sheds light on how important kindness and gentleness is for learning, and this gives us courage to own our failures and successes. This helps us understand primary lenses that are built on Michael Schneider's gentle, wise principles by which the universe is designed, reaffirming the need to be kind and gentle with ourselves. So, question is, how does embracing tenderness and vulnerability help us be more kind and gentle with ourselves?
So, one thing I'm learning a lot. I'm working outside the home for the local community college, and I'm learning to interact with people
Right.
at the community college, and I love the people I work with, for the most part, right? But I'm learning to not be afraid of the people that I'm uncomfortable with.
Right.
So that's, it's a weakness. It's not something I haven't worked outside the home very much in a formal setting like this.
Right.
And so it's a weakness that I'm having to face.
Right.
I send out a lot of emails helping students get registered for EMS classes.
Right.
But also I sometimes have to talk on the phone, and I don't have a ton of experience with that. And I've had to just own the fact that I'm not great at it and just little by little get better.
Right. And that it's okay. I mean, I like how she just describes that it's not just about developing knowledge and claiming power. We have to understand that being humble really is as big a part of learning as learning is. You have to be, and I think that's what this embracing tenderness and vulnerability really speaks to, is being humble and understanding that it's okay that you're not perfect at everything. It's a process, and that we need to understand that with ourselves. Right,
and as we embrace our own vulnerability, our own failures and small successes, then we open the door for other people to do the same.
Exactly.
Exactly. In Brown's book, she takes us on her journey of discovery as she learns about living a wholehearted life. She says, I now see how cultivating a wholehearted life is not like trying to reach a destination. Wholehearted living is not a one-time choice. It is a process. Right. It is the journey of a lifetime. I now see how gifts like courage, compassion, and connection only work when they are exercised every day. She also says, because we are human and so beautifully imperfect, we get to practice using our tools of courage and compassion and connection on a daily basis. In this way, they become the gifts of imperfection, right? Which is where the title of her book comes from. In the second podcast that we did about claiming our learning, we learned about the difference between tangible and intangible learning claims. Right. Tangible learning claims are a lot like goals, like deciding to learn to ride a bike. Intangible learning claims typically have more to do with qualities that we want to cultivate, like learning to act more kindly to a frustrating neighbor. Intangible claims rely more on, as Brown describes, processes. Her thoughts shed light on how the process gives us actions which we use to develop those gifts in our ongoing effort to reach our intangible learning claims. What tangible learning claims do you have that you work on regularly and that have become gifts that you've developed even in the midst of your imperfections?
That's quite a mouthful of a question.
It's a long question. I
is.
love good questions, but they don't always work.
Right. But the thought is, the question is, a good, what intangible learning claims do we have? One of the intangible learning claims that I have is professionally about being more how do I explain it? Being able to, I'm not as much a designer anymore as I am a project manager and managing projects that are being built and constructed, and it's quite a process to make sure you don't miss anything. And so one of my intangible learning claims is being a more effective project manager, to make sure that the client and the contractor are both happy and that the project comes out the way that it was originally designed. And so that's one of the things that I've been working on for a number of years, and it's an ongoing process. Each day I learn something new.
Right.
And I try to learn something new each day in my role as a project manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I touched on one earlier, learning to talk on the phone with students. And I love writing because I can write something, then I go back in and refine it. When you talk on the phone, you can't.
No.
Right? It's done.
The words
like
are
they
there.
heard you.
Yep.
Sometimes if you leave a voicemail, you can tweak it. But so I've had to learn to just be imperfect with it.
Right.
And then hope that, over time, I'm going to, improve that.
Right. All of us have times when life is overwhelming. For those times, Brown gives us a dig deep button. She says the dig deep button is a secret level of pushing through when we're exhausted and overwhelmed, and when there's too much to do and too little time for self-care. Men and women who live wholeheartedly do indeed dig deep, and they do it in a different way. When they're exhausted and overwhelmed, they get deliberate in their thoughts and behaviors through prayer, meditation, or simply setting their intentions, inspired to make new and different choices, and going. They take action. So DIG. Deliberate, inspired, and going. This description of when to use this button can really be helpful when, for a variety of reasons, we're overwhelmed by failures and successes alike. Choosing to be deliberate helps us understand that some seasons of learning require prayer and meditation. Choosing to be inspired helps us understand how stretching can help us see new and different choices in our challenges. And going shows us the value of working with resistance to pull ourselves out of messy situations. So the question is, how do you keep learning when life overwhelms us?
Just in the last week or so, life is stressful, right?
Right.
Comes and goes, right? We get focused on something that really irritates us. And I've just been struggling. But I pulled myself out of it, even for a short while, by working on podcast scripts.
Right.
Or spending time with my learning vistas.
Right.
And when I do that, I just, that mess in front of your face, just, it's less important than the possibilities you have for growth and learning.
Right.
And sometimes life is really overwhelming, and all you can do is ride through the pain and ride through it. But if you approach it with the perspective of learning, then there's a sense that it's just temporary.
Right. And it gets back to her whole principle of wholeheartedness, this being vulnerable and, in my words, humble, as well as trying to learn. Is if you're able to do that when things go wrong, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to ride it through. It's okay if I'm struggling, and because life is difficult. And like you said, you get busy, you start doing things, you start serving, you start working on something that means something to you, and you're able to get through it.
Right. On some level, right?
On
even
some
if
level.
you're still in pain, even if you're still struggling, it's not to say that suddenly everything is fine when you suddenly turn to lurking. You may have to just take a bath and forget everything for a while before you can pull your stuff together and do something else.
And by doing that, the solution to overcome whatever is overwhelming presents itself.
Right.
If you're just sitting still and just waiting for it to go away, it will never go away.
Right.
Right.
In summary, we found that Brown shows us that wholehearted people can learn better because they're kinder with themselves. Processes help us reach for intangible learning claims. And a dig deep button can help us keep learning even when life overwhelms us. That's what we found, but we'd love to hear how Brown's book helps you improve your learning. So thanks for joining us in this discussion. Next time we'll consider how another theory of learning and growth helps us understand learning liberating principles. And as always, if you have questions or comments, message us at learningliberated@gmail.com or on our Learning Liberated Facebook group. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone else that might enjoy it as well.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.